Welcome back to the video. Today we are back for another team prediction video. First, I just want to say that these will be coming out fairly often until the season starts. This is the NFC South, and then we'll still have to do the NFC and AFC, both West and East. So those will be out probably every couple days until the season starts, but those will all be out before the season does officially start, September 7th on that Thursday with the Chiefs and the Lions. But today we are doing the NFC South. So once again, I will have the timestamps in the description and a pinned comment. So if you are a Falcons fan and don't care about the Buccaneers, just go down, click the timestamp, and it'll skip to the whatever part in the video where I talk about the Falcons. And yeah, you can skip the Buccaneers and things like that. But if you do want to watch the Buccaneers, or you're a Buccaneers fan, or watch the entire video, first off, thank you. But second off, the way I do this is I kind of give a quick recap of last year, and then we'll get into kind of this year things, talking over schedule, obviously the players and things like that, coaching, if I feel that it's really needed to talk about, stuff like that. So starting off with the Buccaneers, now it's kind of funny because the top players really don't matter this year because everything that changed for them. Leonard Fournette is gone. Tom Brady's retired. Mike Evans is still there. Levante David, I'm going to be honest, I can't remember if he's there. Yeah, I had to check the depth chart, so I can never remember if he ended up leaving or not. But yeah, so he's still there as well. And then Mike Edwards with the 2 interceptions last year. So overall, it was a very, I guess for every team in the NFC South, it was just very interesting all around because really, no matter how bad you were, you weren't really out of the race to win the division because the entire division was just so bad. The Buccaneers, though they had Tom Brady and all, were really no exception to that. They did barely get into the playoffs after beating the Panthers, and they lost the Cowboys. So, yeah, interesting year. As far as last year goes, Tom Brady, it's his final year in the league. I'm not really going to talk on Tom Brady because there's nothing really to talk about. He's already proved everything he needs to prove. I'm not going to go and criticize Tom Brady, especially if it doesn't really matter going into this year. Leonard Fournette is not really the story anymore. He had an okay year last year, but Rachaad White is now next up, and I think he's projected to have a pretty good year now, getting pretty much all of the work, it seems like. And then also for receiving, you still have Mike Evans and you still have Chris Godwin, and we're going to talk more on that as well because that is really a huge highlight for this offense. They did pretty well last year, very Mike Evans and Chris Godwin-like things. Mike Evans never had a season below 1,000 yards. Every time you hear it, I feel like just kind of it's easy for it to go kind of in one ear and out the other. But that's just really crazy to think that he's never had a season below 1,000 yards receiving. And he hasn't had the best quarterbacks other than Tom Brady. I think it was just kind of Jameis Winston and a few guys here and there that maybe started a couple of games. But yeah, so anyway, that's how last year went. It wasn't really, I would say, a successful year just because overall it was kind of disappointing in the end. And it was hard to see what direction the team was really going. But now into this year, we got the direction the team was going, and they went and they signed Baker Mayfield. Now, I will say, as a Panthers fan last year, I believed in Baker Mayfield. I was really excited, and he was awful. He was really awful. I'm not going to lie. We'll come back to him. I promise you that. They have Rachaad White, like I mentioned. They also have Chase Edmonds, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, Cade Otton, and then offensive line is fairly solid. Although Ryan Jensen on IR, and it sounds like he may have played his last down in the NFL. It's pretty brutal to end a career like that, especially someone as good as Ryan Jensen. You never want to say it for any player, but especially someone that could play at the high level he could. Really sucks to see that. Sucks for Ryan Jensen. It really sucks for the Buccaneers. But, yeah, so overall, that's really kind of where we stand with the Buccaneers offense. Baker Mayfield did win the QB battle with Kyle Trask. Whether that says anything or not, I don't really know. I would say people are probably going to lean more on that doesn't mean anything because if Baker Mayfield's able to build a quarterback, then that guy's probably not very good either. And I can kind of go both sides there. But back to Baker Mayfield. So last year for the Panthers, I can't remember what week he got traded, but it was just very clear that it wasn't going to work out in Carolina. Baker wasn't really performing very well. The entire team wasn't performing very well. It just seemed like it was best for both sides to just kind of call it quits before either side was in kind of too deep. And I think it worked out pretty well. Baker went to the Rams and had that, all-time game, being on the team for 48 hours, somehow winning that. The game was absolutely insane. And then now he finds himself in Tampa Bay. Now, something I will say is that, you can clown on Baker Mayfield, but he had an excellent preseason. And I know it's just preseason, playing against a lot of backups and everything. But, you still want to at least see some good things in preseason. It has to mean, hopefully something, some kind of flashes. And Baker Mayfield actually did do that. He led the offense pretty well. In the entire preseason, he only missed one pass with no interceptions and a touchdown. And I know, like I said, it's preseason, but Baker Mayfield tends to turn the ball over. So for him not throwing an interception is honestly pretty big. And only missing one pass is pretty big. So maybe this is the kind of, I don't know, situation he needs to be in. To his credit, Baker Mayfield's never really had the best weapons in the world. In Cleveland, yes, he did have Odell, which is a very good weapon, and Jarvis Landry. And it seemed like that could have got better, but Odell really wanted out. I don't think he was on the same page with Baker Mayfield at all. And then it seemed like Cleveland kind of turned on Mayfield. So that Browns thing, like, and Mayfield also wasn't bad in Cleveland. People forget, but he almost beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, and he took Cleveland to playoffs for the first time in a long time. So that wasn't a completely failed experiment, really. But even in Carolina, like, I'm a Panthers fan, and the dude had Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, and even McCaffrey got traded away. So there wasn't a whole lot there to work with. And maybe he's just not one of those players that can make, something out of nothing, really. And he does need guys around to be a bit better. Maybe he's not the type of guy that elevates not worse players, but, like, not as standout players. Maybe he needs some bigger players. And honestly, if that's what he needs, the Buccaneers is probably the best place he's going to find that at this point in his career. Because I'm not really sure what other team would take a shot on him at this point, especially as a starter. And I actually did a video going over this for my player prediction series that focused solely on Baker Mayfield, what this year means, because this is probably his last chance to be a starter in the NFL. Maybe after this he bounced around to a couple teams, but it seems like if he's going to start, it needs to be this year. He needs to prove it. And, there's a lot of things that go into that again, we're going to come back to. Over to defense, though, because I can't just not talk about the defense. This defense is actually pretty solid. I want to say I ranked them in the B or A tier. I think I said B tier for my defensive rankings, which I think is a fair ranking because it is just a really solid defense. I don't think it's like that kind of Super Bowl caliber it was a few years ago, but you still have Antoine Winfield, you still have Jamel Dean, Shaquille Barrett, Levante David, Devin White, and then Vita Vea, and then you also draft Kalia Kancey. I'm not sure how to say that name, not gonna lie, but I've heard he's supposed to be pretty good. I don't follow a whole lot of Buccaneers stuff, so I have to kind of like educate myself before I do these videos, and I've heard this guy's looked pretty good, so I guess we'll see how that goes for him. I think it was a solid draft pick, though. I'll give him that. And speaking of the draft, once again, I hate to say that, but we're going to come back to that too. So just hang in there for that. Let's go to the schedule, though, for the Buccaneers, because this is what's going to be really interesting. So they open up against Minnesota. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't see them winning that game. And like I should say this too. Sorry, I'm just all over the place. The first time I did this video, I kind of went game by game predicting. I've done that now moving forward off camera, so I have the record set. I'm just going to talk over every few games and stuff like that, just so it's a bit more concise and stuff like that. But anyway, yeah, so Minnesota, I don't see them winning that. Same with the Eagles and like the Bills and all that kind of stuff, and the 49ers especially. But I think what's huge for the Buccaneers is how bad this division is, because even if every team, let's say, improves, they're still on a pretty similar level. It's still not like one team's way better than the other ones. Even if you want to say like the Falcons are at the top of the division, it's not like a huge gap between second place or even really to fourth place. So that's big for them. The Buccaneers have to, really take advantage of every single divisional game this year because they're all winnable. You have to win those games. Out of the division, you got the Colts you can win. Houston, you could probably win there too. But other than that, I guess Chicago, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough year. Overall, though, I kind of went through here, and it's really difficult to predict the entire season record because you don't know what's going to happen. So, and I will say I'm going to do week picks as the season goes on. So, because I'm picking right now that on December 3rd they might lose to Carolina, that doesn't mean when December 1st rolls around, I'm not going to predict them to win that. It's going to change. That's all I'm saying. But as of right now, I have the Buccaneers going 5-12. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that, if you agree or disagree. Some might think that's a little too high. I hear a lot of people say they're going to tank for Caleb Williams and all that kind of stuff. And I don't really know if that's the case, to be honest. I don't really know if that's the case because this division is so winnable. Like, in my opinion, yes, the Buccaneers are probably the worst team in the division, but it's not that far off. And if Baker Mayfield even is, like, slightly competent this year, he has the weapons to where the Buccaneers can definitely compete with any other team in this division. So I could be way off by saying that if Baker Mayfield happens to pop off. I think he will have his fair share of games, but overall, I just think the Buccaneers are going to be toward the bottom of the league as far as just record goes and everything. I don't think they'll be the worst team in the league. I've said before, so I'll just say it now. I guess spoiler alert for the NFC West predictions, but I think the Cardinals will probably be one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the entire NFL. I think the Buccaneers will be down there, not quite the worst. And like I said, a lot of these can go either way, especially these divisional games, like Carolina, like Atlanta, like New Orleans. Green Bay's one where, like, that is so impossible to predict right now because you have no idea how Baker Mayfield or Jordan Love is going to be playing at that point in the year. So that's, like, complete toss-up in my opinion. But again, that's the games that they need. They need the toss-ups, and they need to be able to take advantage of those because it's going to be really tough if they don't. They don't have a lot of games out of the division to where I can really say that they're going to win that. Like I said, I think Chicago is one of them, and I think Houston and Indianapolis and maybe Green Bay is one of them. Other than that, it's tough. You got the Bills, you got the 49ers, you got the Titans, you got the Lions, you got the Eagles, and the Vikings. So that's my record prediction for the Buccaneers, but don't go anywhere if you're a Buccaneers fan. There's still some things to talk about. Usually I kind of wrap it up, and I do like the bold predictions for each of the top players at this point, and I will do those. But first, I mentioned the draft before, and I want to talk about that again because I did just mention it. It has been kind of speculated. Maybe they want to, whether or not you believe in tanking, that's up to you. But it is thought that if the Buccaneers do end up having one of the top picks, they could take Caleb Williams. And personally, I think the Buccaneers will be in a position to do that. Maybe not one, but I would think probably top 4, and then maybe you trade up to 1 or to 2 or whatever it may be to take him. But it's going to entirely depend on what Baker Mayfield does this year. If he proves like kind of like a Geno Smith type way where he still has some years in him to be a good quarterback, then I'm not sure why they would throw all that away when the division is still so winnable. Like there's really not a whole lot of reason to not at least try and compete unless you want to draft a quarterback, let him sit for a couple of years, wait for Mayfield to go, and then throw him in, which maybe that's the right approach, honestly. It just kind of depends. But one thing I will say is that though I picked the Buccaneers to end up 5-12 in the standings this year, that could very easily change. I really think any team in this division could finish first through last. I think it's going to be a complete toss-up. But I will say the Buccaneers, in my opinion, are the weakest just because of their massive question mark at quarterback. Another team we'll get to in this division also kind of has that, but there's reasons that I'm higher on that team, and we'll get to that. But for the Buccaneers, that's really all my thoughts on them. I would spend more time maybe talking about how Baker's going to fit in that offense. But honestly, I think we just got to wait and see at this point. I think we can talk all we want about how, he can use Mike Evans and all this kind of stuff. But, like, for Baker, you just got to see if it happens or not. Because you can speculate all you want. But it seems like when it comes to him, he can be incredibly inconsistent to where, honestly, I just want to see what happens. But you know what? If he's able to turn it on, he has good weapons on this team. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, that's a very good wide receiver duo, and Rachaad White is supposed to have a pretty good year as well. So they will have a somewhat decent offense if Baker Mayfield can compete, but that's just a big question mark kind of for this season for the Buccaneers. So moving on then to the final kind of segment of this team, which is my kind of bold predictions I do. Sometimes they're bold, sometimes they're not that bold, just kind of things that I want to see out of 3 players on this team this season, like season long basically. And I gotta do one for Baker Mayfield. I think, like, I don't even know a good passing yard number for him, to be honest. We'll just say whatever his touchdown to interception ratio is. Let's say he has 3 more touchdowns than interceptions. I don't care if it's only 9 touchdowns. As long as he can keep the turnovers down, that is going to be how the Buccaneers stay in the game, because if Baker keeps giving the ball away, it's going to be really tough to win some of these games, especially the teams we looked at with those high-powered offenses like Buffalo, like Philadelphia. Like, if you give the ball away 3 times, you're not coming back and beating them. It's just not going to happen. So That's a big thing for Mayfield, in my opinion. Honestly, passing yards, I couldn't care less. Take care of the ball, use those weapons well, and then just see how everything comes together after that. Rachaad White, we'll say 1,000 rushing yards. I think he's going to have a really good year, to be honest. I think it's pretty easy to overlook him because he's on the Buccaneers, which I think that's kind of supposed to suck this year. But I think he's a great running back, and he could have a very good year this year. So we'll say 1,000 rushing yards for him. Baker's touchdown thing. And then, honestly, we'll just go with a classic. Mike Evans has to get over 1,000 receiving yards. That'll be like my final one. Hopefully, he can keep that tradition alive. But, it might be tough this year, but he's definitely going to make it happen. So we'll see how that goes. But that is really kind of all of the Buccaneers segment of this video. I'm honestly not sure how long it is compared to other ones I've done. Hopefully, it was long enough. But honestly, there's so many unknowns with this team. It's really tough to give a fair projection because you just really don't know what they're going to do, which I know it's kind of the same for all the teams, but especially the Buccaneers because of that question mark at quarterback. But let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are on the Buccaneers this year. And honestly, I'm not even sure what the next team on this video is going to be, so just over the next team. All right, guys, and the next team is the Panthers. Now, I would be lying if I said that I haven't been looking forward to this the entire series of these videos. But we're finally here, and I gotta say my thoughts on my own personal favorite team. So quick recap of last year. Oh man, and what a year it was. So Baker Mayfield, 1,313 yards. Obviously he gets traded away. Sam Darnold comes in the game at one point. PJ Walker plays at one point. Deontay Foreman honestly came up pretty big for him, almost 1,000 rushing yards, and he had a pretty good year after McCaffrey got traded. DJ Moore, honestly, not his best at all, and that's not on him. It's just a horrible situation, and I'm going to get to the whole Bears-Panthers trade thing in a minute, so I'm just going to let that sit there for right now. Shaq Thompson, really the leader of that defense. It's a good year from him. And J.C. Horn, good year, but just please stay healthy. I will donate whatever body part you need when you hurt it, but just please try and stay healthy. Because I promise you guys, he is one of the better corners in the entire NFL, but he just has not been able to stay healthy for a full season yet. But when he's playing, he does lock down some very good receivers. But yeah, so last year, like, man, I'm just lost for words. Like, McCaffrey, he gets traded away. I think it was for the best for the team. I think it wasn't fair to either side. And I mentioned this in, I think, the running back tier list or something like that, where, like, honestly, he needed to be off the team as much as I love McCaffrey because the Panthers became way too dependent on him to where it wasn't fair to run an offense only through one player because it was, for one, excluding all the other players, and two, once they shut down McCaffrey, you had no idea what to do with the football because you didn't give the ball to anybody else or run anything differently. A lot of that is on coaching, which was Matt Rule, and I'm not going to talk about him because it's going to annoy me. After McCaffrey, though, I can't even remember. Oh, yeah, the other part of that, because it wasn't fair for the offense, and then it also wasn't fair for McCaffrey because he's getting ran into the ground, and it was making him seem injury prone. And honestly, McCaffrey's not really injury prone. The injuries he dealt with were not the same injury, and it was really, I think, just because he was being kind of overworked. He went to San Francisco, absolutely thrived. I'm honestly really happy for him. I like the 49ers just fine, so it's easy to root for him. I was really happy about that, so happy for him that he's there. I think it was just best for both sides, as much as it may have sucked. But there is no way for the Panthers to move in a positive direction without just trying to redo everything. And unfortunately, he was just part of that redo. But at least he's in a good spot now. I said as if he died, but like, he's just on the 49ers. Anyway, so yeah, decent rushing year. I guess honestly, yeah, decent rushing year thanks to Deontay Foreman. Hubbard didn't do too bad either. Receiving wise, DJ Moore, I already kind of mentioned him. Terrace Marshall is someone that I kind of hope will step up and have a big year this year, but he's hurt right now, and I'll talk more on him later. Laviska Shenault, I think it's a great trade. He's a very dynamic player. He's kind of like Walmart Deebo Samuel. He's very dynamic. He can be used at the backfield, screen passes, as a receiver. Not as good as Deebo at all, but like I said, similar player, just not on the same level. And then other than that, you have Robbie Chosen, or whatever he updated his name to. Yeah, and then Ian Thomas. So I just want to move on from last year. Let's talk about this year because I think it's a much brighter spot for me to talk about here. So first off, you have Bryce Young at quarterback, and I'm going to get to him in just a minute. But Miles Sanders, you signed in free agency. It's a great signing, to be honest. I would have been just fine keeping Deontay Foreman because he did great, but Miles Sanders is a good running back too, so I'm cool with that. Adam Thielen, I think is a great signing to bring in a veteran receiver. And Thielen has some good football left in him. He's not going to lead the league or probably get 1,300 yards, but he's going to be able to coach up the young guys and provide some meaningful minutes for them that they're really going to need. DJ Chark, so good when he's healthy, but he just can't stay healthy. I hope he can stay healthy for him. He seems to be very good. Already had some pretty good connection with Bryce Young, it looks like. And Jonathan Mingo, the rookie they drafted, who apparently is starting. I never thought that was going to happen, but he is, and he looks pretty good. Mingo did have a few catches in preseason and looked pretty decent there. And then Hayden Hurst from Cincinnati. Love that tight end signing. Hurst is a good tight end. Not sure why he's kind of bounced around teams, to be honest. Had a good year last year, and I expect him to be a pretty good weapon this year. And then the offensive line. And honestly, this was something I wasn't worried about this year. I thought the Panthers did a good job in the past couple seasons really strengthening it. And man, they looked bad. And I know it's just preseason. And Austin Corbett's not even back. He's one of the better, if not the best guy on that offensive line. Ike Mekwonu was who they drafted last year. And he has struggled in preseason, I'm not going to lie. But again, it's preseason at the end of the day. It does matter, but it doesn't count. That's what you have to remember. It does matter to see guys in good spots, but it doesn't count. So if they mess up, it's all good. You want that to happen then, not in the regular season. So hopefully that offensive line is better then, but I am not going to lie, I'm a little worried as of right now. But they need Austin Corbett back very badly. And that Michael Jordan guy, no idea how he still has a job. He needs to change his name to something, not Michael Jordan or something. Yeah, so to the defense, though, and again, I will get back to the offense, especially Bryce Young in a minute. Guys I want to highlight, though, Derrick Brown, Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu. And I don't want to leave out J.C. Horn, but just hear me out on this. Derrick Brown, he improved a ton over last offseason into last season. He had a great year last year, and he was statistically one of the better defensive tackles in the entire NFL. Not sure why he's listed as a defensive end there, but whatever. And yeah, so I am really excited to see what he does this year. Brian Burns, again, he's a great defensive end. I'm not sure. I guess he's listed as linebacker, but he's very good as well. I love him. And then Frankie Louvu, this is a guy that's really gotten bigger and bigger as each year's gone on. I believe this is, like, I don't know what year in the league. I think he's relatively young. And he's been very good for him. He had a pick six last year against Arizona. I like Frankie Louvu a lot, and he is definitely a player to watch. Other than that, though, in free agency, you bring over Von Bell from Cincinnati. It's a great signing, in my opinion. Justin Houston, fairly recent, but again, I think it's a great signing. They needed some defensive line depth, and, you know, he's honestly a proven veteran edge rusher, so I like that a lot, too. And other than that, Dante Jackson, he's a veteran corner, but he's pretty good. Xavier Woods isn't bad either, and then, of course, I already mentioned J.C. Horn. C.J. Henderson kind of scares me, not going to lie, but overall, I think the Panthers' defense is pretty good. Shaq Thompson is one of the better linebackers for them on the team, at least as of right now. But in my opinion, Frankie Louvu will become quite better than Shaq Thompson. He's a much higher ceiling. Then Deion Jones, they also recently signed, so that's pretty cool too. But yeah, let's go back to the offense, because the defense is something that I think will actually look pretty good this year. New defensive coordinator, Avero, I can never remember his first name is, but he's supposed to be pretty good, and I'm really excited to have him kind of for the Panthers and see like what he can do with that defense. But Bryce Young, I gotta highlight him. I've said from the beginning, you can go back to my draft video, all that kind of stuff. I am a believer in Bryce Young, but there are some contingencies on that. And I do think the whole too small thing is just kind of stupid, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I mean, the jokes are funny, don't get me wrong, but like, I don't think he is too small. Like, and I think he says before too, like, he's been that height his whole life. It's not like it's suddenly a huge issue, especially at Alabama. Like, the athletes they have and the guys they produce, they usually turn out pretty well in the NFL. You're behind offensive linemen that are similar in size to NFL players. And even if it's not the same offense and all that kind of stuff, passing lanes, he's still the same quarterback, and he can adapt to that. And I think he has adapted very well. And honestly, he got a lot better as the preseason went on. He always looked pretty good, but he just didn't really get a lot of reps or time to throw the ball. But this most recent game, threw the touchdown pass to Adam Thielen, and I mean, he's looked as advertised. I'm really excited for Bryce Young. But one of the contingencies on him performing is you have to protect him. I get he's small, he's skinny, whatever. But seriously, if you don't protect him, he's going to get hurt easier than someone built like Anthony Richardson might, because he's bigger, he's built, he's strong. It's different. Even Cam Newton, I already watched this movie. I already watched a quarterback I really liked get absolutely nailed because he wasn't protected. And where's Cam Newton now? You know what I mean? I love Cam Newton, but like he's not in the league now. He suffered a lot of injuries. And you just can't allow that, especially on a smaller quarterback. So that is one of the things that if Bryce Young is going to perform well, they have to get the offensive line fixed because it's going to either get him hurt or wreck his confidence or just make him look bad by not being able to get passes off and throwing interceptions or something like that. I mean, it's just, it has to be fixed. I believe in it. These guys played well last year, and I believe they can get back to that. I'm not going to say you're an overreact to preseason, but that is a big thing that has to happen for Bryce Young to be able to perform his best because you see it with guys like Joe Burrow. I mean, the better his offensive line's got, Burrow's just got better because Burrow, with a horrible offensive line, nearly won a Super Bowl. And, you know, it's gotten better, and he's obviously had more time to throw, and he's put up great numbers. I think he's statistically the most accurate quarterback in NFL history as of, I think, last season or something. So, yeah, very important offensive line. Overall, though, the Panthers' offense is, like, I don't want to say the word, but if I'm being honest, it's a little mid. Like, let's be real here. Bryce Young thinks we have a very good young quarterback. Miles Sanders is a good running back. He's not an outstanding running back, but he's not a bad running back. He's just a good running back. Adam Thielen is a good veteran wide receiver. DJ Chark, good receiver. Hayden Hurst, good tight end. No one's really like that standout, you know, really, really good. And I don't think it's really needed right now. It just needs to help Bryce Young get adapted to the NFL. And I do think for that, the weapons are definitely good enough. But to continue getting better, this needs to be something that you continue to kind of strengthen as the years go on. And Terrace Marshall Jr. is something that I really hope can step up because he has a lot of potential, but he's currently hurt with a back injury right now. But other than that, Mingo, very high ceiling. Bryce Young, very high ceiling. And a couple guys on the offensive line as well. But yeah, so moving on to the schedule for the Panthers. Now, the Buccaneers had going 5-12. I will be honest, I think Carolina has, I would say, better odds to win the out-of-divisional games they face than the Buccaneers do. And let's just talk about it. So, games I think that Carolina are absolutely not going to win are probably Dallas, Miami, Jacksonville, probably Tennessee. I think other than that, Seattle, the Panthers gave Seattle a game last year. I honestly can't remember if they won or not, but they gave them a game. I think they can again because the Panthers defense is fairly strong to slow that Seattle offense down. I do think they can give Minnesota a game. Minnesota's defense is pretty bad. There should be basically zero defense being kind of played in that game. Although I do want to see J.C. Horn versus Justin Jefferson in that game. Other than that, though, I mean, you play Detroit. I think you can beat the Lions. I think you can beat Houston. You can beat the Colts. You can beat the Bears. You can beat Green Bay. But just like the Buccaneers, and I'm going to say this for every team in this division, you got to make the most of your divisional games because those teams aren't good. You're in the worst division in football. You have to capitalize on every single divisional game because it's going to add up. It's going to be really important. So that way whenever you get to like the Miamis and the Dallases, you can afford to lose. Not that you want to lose, but you can afford to lose it because you've already taken the most you can with other teams and winning the winnable games you're supposed to win. Because if you don't do that and you start losing your out-of-divisional games, it's going to turn into a very bad year very fast. But overall, I do have Carolina going 9-8. So, and I'm going to be honest, don't get all in the comments now. I mean, that's not the top of this division. Okay, so I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not biased. I don't have them even win the division as of right now. And we'll get to who I think will in a few teams or however many away we are. I don't even know. But yeah, so again, a lot of those can go either way. But in my opinion, I think that's all I want this year from Carolina. We don't need to make the playoffs. We don't need Bryce Young to throw for 4,000 yards and set the whatever record. I don't really care about that. I want to see them break 500. And if they don't, at least come close to it and just have Bryce Young have a good year to where he can show what he can do. He is your franchise guy, and you go from there because rebuilds don't take 1 year. What Joe Burrow did in Cincinnati, that was really a 1-2 year thing. That doesn't happen that often. I mean, you land an amazing quarterback and an amazing receiver in Jamar Chase, and you signed really well in free agency. So I'm not saying the Panthers can't do that, but it's not this year. It's just not this year. I think it can be in a few years, but you got to get better weapons, and there's still some holes in this team. But this year, I just want 500 or close to it and just have Bryce Young perform and just see what all he can really do at the next level. I think he'll be good, but that's really my expectations for the year. The playoffs definitely possible, but in my opinion, there is a team better than the Panthers that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Better but not a lot, though. I'll admit, I have them up there, but not by a lot. But yeah, so that's kind of how I see the Panthers season going with this schedule. Let me know down below any teams you think I got, or teams. Let me know down below any games you think I got right or wrong, or maybe the entire record's way off. I don't know. Let me down below, though. I would be very interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. So let's do some bold predictions here. We have to do Bryce Young. I want Bryce Young to throw for at least 20 touchdowns. I think it's very possible. Like I said, the weapons are good, not great, but good enough to where a good rookie quarterback can throw for that many, especially one as smart as Bryce, who doesn't force turnovers and force passes like that and sees the field very well. So I don't care with the yards, but I think 20 touchdowns for Bryce Young would be absolutely huge for him. I think it's very possible. So that's kind of like one of my bolder predictions. Next, I'll say Jonathan Mingo, 700 receiving yards. I think he's going to quickly establish himself as one of, if not the best receiver on this team. And I'm going to be honest, he surprised me with that. I didn't think he'd step into it year one and really do that. But the more I've seen of him, the more I've seen kind of like his after the catch abilities. He already has pretty good size. Like I actually really like him going into this year. So yeah, that's kind of like my two. And then JC Horn will say 6 interceptions, doubles last year, has a great year, stays healthy. Maybe I'm daydreaming right now, but that's just kind of my bold prediction. I think it's very possible for him. I just hope the guy can stay healthy because he's a great player and he does deserve it. But as a Panthers fan, there are a lot of things I look forward to this season. There's a lot of players, especially Bryce Young, especially JC Horn, Jonathan Mingo. But, you know, it's very easy for this to become a very bad year if you're not careful because that division can flip on you very easily. It's going to be very competitive. I see the Panthers near the top, not quite there though. And maybe the next team is the first place team I have. Maybe it's not because honestly I'm not sure I'm going to cover, but on to the next team. All right, guys, and next we have the Saints. The Saints are a team that I honestly, not even this division, across all 32 teams, when it's come to predicting this year and looking at the offense this year and the defense this year, in every aspect, like I said, offense, defense, whole team, anything, I have been so back and forth on, and it was very hard to really form my opinion on it because I change it so often. But I think I've come to one that I'm confident in and feel good enough in, but honestly, it could change a lot. I'm going to be honest. Let's recap last year, though. So Jameis Winston starts out the year, doesn't play too much, and then he gets hurt, I believe, and then Andy Dalton comes in, and, you know, pretty solid year. I mean, at this point in Andy Dalton's career, that's probably what you're going to expect. And honestly, I think it says 9 interceptions to 18 touchdowns. Dalton could throw more interceptions than that. I'm going to be honest. I think he honestly did a pretty good job last year, especially utilizing Chris Olave and really showcasing his abilities because Olave was able to get open, but quarterback has to give him the ball, and Dalton honestly did a pretty good job of that. So I think it was great work by both of them. And it was exciting to see what Olave can do, and I will talk more on him in a minute. Rushing-wise, Alvin Kamara, I think it says 897 yards there and 2 touchdowns. Taysom Hill, of course, just kind of does everything, it seems like. And, yeah, receiving-wise, Chris Olave, Juwan Johnson, Alvin Kamara, and then Rashid Shaheed. I cannot remember how to say that guy's name. Hopefully I said that right. Maybe I butchered it. Honestly, I'm not really sure. And then, of course, Michael Thomas. And we'll get to that. Believe me, I'm going to talk about Michael Thomas. But overall, the Saints, kind of like every team in this division last year, almost won the division because it was so terrible. But not much has changed this year in the sense of the division being out of reach. It's still very possible for them. And the Saints arguably got better. So let's talk about it. Let's go to the depth chart here and look at Derek Carr as a starting quarterback. I'm going to be honest, and I've said this anytime I've ever mentioned Derek Carr. I don't think he's a bad quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. But he's a good quarterback, and he's an upgrade over Andy Dalton, and really, that's all that matters. But I will come back to him, so let's wait on that. Alvin Kamara suspended for the first 3 games. We'll talk about that more when we get to the schedule portion. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and then Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, and then the offensive line there. I believe, was it Penning they drafted last year? I might be way off with that. I can't really remember. But still Ryan Ramczyk, and I know he's good. So, yeah. Saints offense, I think, is in a pretty good spot. I'm going to be honest. I'm not a big believer in Derek Carr, and I wanted to come back to this because I've said this before. Derek Carr is not your solution at quarterback long term. He might be pretty good for the next 3-4 seasons, if that, but he's not going to put your team in a spot of consistency on offense for the next 7+ seasons. That's just not the case. At a certain point, you're going to have to draft a quarterback, who you did draft with Jake Hayner, I think is how I say his last name. Personally, I don't think he's someone that eventually takes over the team, in my opinion. I think he did okay in preseason, but, you know, I think someone like Aiden O'Connell for the Raiders, who, like, actually did pretty well in preseason, that's more of a conversation to be had if maybe he takes over eventually. I don't think that's Jake Hayner. I think for the Saints, you wait till there's a correct prospect you like and you draft them fairly high. That's, I think, what you need to do. I don't think it's like trade for whoever. I think that approach is kind of out the window at this point. I think Derek Carr is not a bad option, though, to see where this team can go with him at quarterback, because look, he's not bad. He's not a bad quarterback. He's just a little inconsistent, but his highs are pretty high. He can get your guys the ball. He's better than Andy Dalton, and he has good weapons like Chris Olave, like Alvin Kamara. And now back to Michael Thomas. I'm going to be honest, I do not prey on players' downfalls, and that's not what I'm doing with Michael Thomas. But I will say I'm not falling for it this year, because I have heard this since the last, 2019, when he set the receiving yard record, whatever it was, for receptions in a season. I'm not falling for it. Year after year, he's back, he's this, and then he just gets hurt again. I mean, he's played, like, I think they said 16 games in the last 3 or 4 seasons or something. Like, he's a great receiver, don't get me wrong, because if you're not a great receiver, you don't set the receptions record in a single season. But I think we're past that now. When you look at guys like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Cooper Kupp, even like an A.J. Brown, like these younger guys, they can do everything Michael Thomas can, but better in some aspects, and then do things that he can't do. And I think the injuries have unfortunately set him back so far to where he's never going to be one of the best receivers in the league again. I think it's just kind of in the past. He can be much better than what he's been like in the past couple seasons, because he's barely been anything, but he's not going to be like 2019 Michael Thomas. All this, I think that's over, but I do think he can get to the point where he's healthy again and be a very good wide receiver 2 option to Chris Olave, because Chris Olave is someone that I think is the future of this team at wide receiver. I did an individual video on Chris Olave, and again, I'm a fan of a division rival. I don't like the Saints. I'm going to be honest, I don't. But I love Chris Olave and everything he brings to the Saints, because he's a very good receiver. He had Andy Dalton throwing the ball last year, and he was able to separate. He was able to make plays. He's good after the catch. I mean, he's only going to get better. And I think the more consistency you bring at quarterback, the better it is for Olave. Carr, I think, is more consistent than Dalton and is a better quarterback. But eventually, you got to get a young guy. You got to get the next leader of this offense. And I don't think it's Carr, but I don't think it's not Carr for the next few seasons, if that makes sense. So I think he can do it, but I think of Carr as more of a Band-Aid rather than an actual solution to the wound that is quarterback, basically. But overall, Saints offense, I do think, takes a step up. Kamara suspension, once again, we will get to that on the schedule portion of this video. And over to defense. The Saints defense is, again, something that I have gone back and forth on. You got Marshawn Lattimore. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you know what you have there. You have one of the better corners in the NFL. You know, no questions asked. Moving on from that, you have Marshawn Lattimore. Same conversation with Cameron Jordan. Nothing to talk about there. You got Cameron Jordan. Demario Davis, still pretty good. Tyrann Mathieu, toward the end of his career, but still a good safety and still going to make plays for you. Marcus May, I think, is pretty good as well. But other than that, I do think there's some holes around the defense. But the Saints defense, for whatever reason, is just always very solid. And I don't know what it is, but it seems like they're always ready to compete. Kind of similar to the Titans. Like the Titans, no matter how bad their team is, Vrabel always gets them ready to compete. It could look awful on paper, but they put up a fight against whoever they play. That's just great coaching. I think the Saints have that as well. I will say Brian. I think you never say how I think you do, but we'll just say Brian. I guess Brian it is. Brian, I think, was a good draft pick, and I do think he can end up becoming a starter on the defense. Maybe he already is, and it just isn't updated or whatever. But I do think that's a solid draft pick for you. And the Saints defense is something that, I'm going to be honest, I'm not worried about, because you tend to kind of know what you're getting with the Saints defense. You're getting a very solid defense. It's going to make plays. It's going to cause turnovers. It's not going to be one of the best in the entire league, but it's going to be good enough to give your offense more opportunities to the ball by forcing turnovers. And that's why I truly think more of the focus is really on the offense this year because of all the changes to it. I don't think there's really a question on defense. You kind of know what you have there. There might be some holes here and there, but it's better than a lot of other defenses. And honestly, this is where the focus is, because this is more of the unknown than the defense is. And this is what I want to talk about more on the schedule. So let's get to the schedule portion of this video. I forgot to zoom in, so that's my fault there. Hope that's good enough. Yeah, so first off, let's talk about Kamara. Kamara is suspended for the first 3 games: the Titans, the Panthers, and the Packers. This is the, yeah, okay, I was making sure this is actually like week 1 stuff. Honestly, not the biggest loss during those 2 games. Titans, you want to have him, but you could probably beat the Panthers or the Packers without him. But, you'll get him back for, really good defenses like New England. That's big, and so on. So, overall, though, I do have the Saints, drum roll, 9-8. Same as the Panthers. Maybe I tricked you guys. I don't know. There's still more team to cover, so we'll get to the Falcons at that point. But I do have the Saints going 9-8 because I think they're a very similar team to the Panthers in the sense of the win consistency. I think the Saints, like the Panthers, can very easily surprise you and lose some games you would not think they would lose, and maybe win some games you would not think they would win. I will say I think the Saints teams that they play out of the division are easier than a few others in the NFC South. For instance, you play Green Bay, it's very winnable. Houston, very winnable. Colts, very winnable. Chicago, very winnable. But teams like the Rams, you can definitely beat the Rams. Even the Giants, maybe it's a bad pick, but I think the Saints can beat the Giants. I think you can definitely take advantage of that. I think you can give Detroit a game, but it might be too much to try and stop that offense. I will be honest. So that's more of I'm not really sure there. But they do play a lot of games where it can go either way. I've said it for every team, so I might as well say it for this one and my next team as well, which is the Falcons. But you got to make the most of each divisional game. You absolutely have to, because if you don't, those are likely the easiest teams you will play, apart from maybe the Colts or the Texans. So if you don't make the most of that, you're going to find yourself in a hole that you're not going to be able to dig out of, because the games you need to win happen to be divisional games, because division is so terrible. So yeah, I just had to say that again, I guess. But yeah, so Saints 9-8. Again, same as Carolina. I think it could really go either way. I think they could just as easily go 8-9. I think they could just easily go 5-12 or 12-5. I think it's really all over the place. 12-5 is a lot. I don't think they can go that high, but still, 10-7 maybe. I think it's all over the place with this division. I think the Saints and the Panthers are pretty even. And that's just really how I see the schedule kind of season portion playing out for the Saints. But again, that can wildly change if Derek Carr happens to be horrible, or if maybe things click more than I even think they will, and maybe they're even better. I don't know. But in my opinion, that's just where I kind of see things as of right now for the Saints. Let's kind of recap the Saints here real quick, just for this kind of, I guess, whole season for this year. Things you want to see that are kind of like a big priority, in my opinion, is Derek Carr. You really want to see what you have in him for maybe the next few seasons. I don't know, but it's going to depend on what he does this year. So you want to see some sort of consistency, maybe even a step up from the Raiders. Just anything positive from Derek Carr that you can take away and be like, you know what, maybe this guy can put us in a position to win for the next couple seasons until we think of a long-term quarterback solution. That is, in my opinion, the biggest thing. I think apart from that, you want to see your defense stay at the level it has and continue to force turnovers and be one of the better defense, not in the entire NFL, but probably the upper half in the NFL, I'd say. And other than that, like that's really what you want from the Saints. And apart from that, playoffs, because it's possible for every team in this division. So I think it's very possible for them. As far as like bold predictions go, gotta do Derek Carr, and we'll say like, I don't know, what did Derek Carr even do last year? I honestly don't even know. Let's go to just depth chart and Derek Carr, because I don't know what he finished with. Okay, not that. How do you? I always try to go to the previous season, man. Last year he had 3,500 yards and he had 24 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. I would say I mean, higher touchdowns obviously is great, but I would say lower interceptions too. Try and keep that 10 or below. I think would be huge for Derek Carr. He does tend to turn the ball over a little bit, but 10 interceptions, like when you also have a pretty good running game, I think if you're, I guess it really depends on how much you pass the ball, I should say. But I will say, because they run the ball a fair amount with Alvin Kamara and all, you also drafted Kendre Miller. Like, I think 10 interceptions, 10, 12 around there is where you want to be for Derek Carr. And then, of course, 20-plus touchdowns at the minimum. 30 would be huge. I think that would be really good for Derek Carr and the Saints if he can get to 30. Will that happen? Not really sure, but I think that's kind of what you want to see from him. That's also not where I wanted to be for the home thing. But yeah, so that's for Derek Carr. Chris Olave, we're going to say 1,200 yards. What did he do for touchdowns, though? I want to do okay, so he had 4. We'll say 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. A big year for Chris Olave. I think that'd be huge for him. I think it's very possible. No one's going to take away targets from him. Unless Michael Thomas makes some otherworldly comeback, I don't think it's going to take targets away from Chris Olave. I think he's still easily the best receiver on that offense. And as for the third player, like, I guess you can do Tyrann Mathieu if you want. Honestly, I don't even know. Do we just do all offense? Because I said the offense was like the focus of this. We'll just do all offense. I said it was the focus. Alvin Kamara, we'll say like, I mean, he is suspended for the first 3 games. Last year he had 8. Okay. So we'll say Kamara like, we'll say Kamara 850, even though he's gonna be suspended. I think it's very possible. As far as touchdowns go, I don't really know. It depends what that offense looks like, if they're going to kind of pass more in the backfield or what. I would think they would, because he's a great receiver out of the backfield, but I guess we'll have to see what Derek Carr does for the Saints. I'm really excited to see how that kind of pans out. As a Panthers fan, I hope it doesn't pan out great, but as a football fan, I do hope there's some sort of excitement for the Saints there, because it would be kind of cool to see Derek Carr kind of rehash his career a little bit after being pushed down a bit on the Raiders and just all out of whack and discombobulated there. But that is going to do it for the Saints portion of this video. Let me down below your thoughts on the Saints, record, players, anything like that. And now on to the 4th and final team of the video. All right, guys, and so for now, the 4th and final team of the video is the Atlanta Falcons. And last year, man, was it a weird year. So first off, Marcus Mariota, not the best. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him. Tyler Algier, though, really good year, honestly. I can't remember when he was drafted. I think he was, like, pretty late in the draft, and he had over 1,000 rushing yards, and honestly was a pretty fun part of that offense, and I think that's really cool for him. Drake London had a pretty good year, considering the quarterback position was so all around. 866 yards, really not that bad. I think he also got hurt, but maybe I could be wrong there. And then, yeah, so rushing-wise, Algier, we kind of covered him. Patterson also a solid year, because that dude just does literally everything. Mariota did okay rushing as well. He had 4 rushing touchdowns. Receiving, Drake London did pretty well. Other than that, it does fall off a bit, and we're going to talk about that this year, or for this season. But overall, yeah, again, like every team in the division, they almost won the division because they all sucked last year. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and jump to depth chart. I have some things I want to talk about for the Falcons, so I'm not really going to linger too much there. I did not mean to do that. Let's get to the depth chart. You have Desmond Ridder, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Mac Hollins, Scott Miller, Kyle Pitts, and then of course your offensive line there. So let's start with Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder is what holds me back from predicting bigger things from this offense. And that is my unbiased opinion. My biased opinion is Desmond Ridder sucks, and the Panthers are always going to be better than the Falcons, but that's not for this video. For this video, I like the Falcons offense a lot, but Desmond Ridder does scare me a little bit because of the unknowns there, and he's looked a little shaky at times. Preseason, not too bad. I know he had a pick against the Bengals. Not his fault. It was like ricocheted up in the air. Like, I'm not going to hold that to him at all. But then other than Desmond Ridder, Bijan Robinson, who, like, I don't want to have to watch him destroy the Panthers twice a year, but it's going to happen. I don't see literally any way this guy does not either win Offensive Rookie of the Year or at least be top 2. I mean, maybe a quarterback goes absolutely off that plays in Carolina. But other than that, I'm going to guess Bijan Robinson's probably the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Drake London, very good young receiver. But again, Desmond Ridder kind of scares me a little bit there. But after him, it does fall off a little bit. Mac Hollins and Scott Miller. I think Mac Hollins is good enough. Scott Miller is a little, I don't know about that one. But Kyle Pitts. Look, if I was a coach on the Falcons, I would be grabbing Desmond Ridder by his ear and screaming at him to throw the ball to Kyle Pitts. Why he was not used last year, I have no idea. I don't know if that was trying to move to a different scheme maybe, or if Marcus Mariota just hates Kyle Pitts, or what that was. But you gotta get this guy incorporated more. There's absolutely no reason you wouldn't, especially when your wide receiver 2 and 3 are a little shaky. Kyle Pitts makes up for both of them. Use Kyle Pitts. It makes no sense why you wouldn't, especially because that running back room is very nice. Bijan Robinson can play out of the slot, so I think said they plan on doing that as well. So maybe you have Robinson out the slot some plays, Algier in the backfield. Algier is not a bad running back. I mean, honestly, you didn't need to draft Bijan Robinson because you had Algier, but I'm not sure why you'd pass up on Bijan Robinson. You know what I mean? So you can do a lot of fun things with this offense. I think Ridder scares me, but I think everything else is really exciting for the Falcons. Over to defense though, and this is something where I think some people, I can't remember which video it was, but there are some Falcons fans not happy with me on one video, and I guess about not giving them credit or something, but I have given the Falcons plenty of credit, more so than I would ever like to say out loud. But especially for this past offseason, Calais Campbell was a great free agent signing. He's not young, but he provides some sort of depth and just honestly, I mean, impact on that defensive line because there wasn't a whole lot there. And then you also have Jesse Bates, one of the biggest free agency signings in the entire NFL. He's one of the better safeties in the entire NFL. You paid him some money, but, I mean, he's a great free safety. You can't knock that. That's a great signing. It's huge for the Falcons. You got him in the secondary. You got A.J. Terrell in the secondary. Jeff Okudah is someone that I think there is opportunity there. I think the Lions did a good job of getting rid of him just because it was, I think, getting to be a bit rough for both sides. Clearly, he wasn't going to produce for the Lions. The Lions was kind of wasting a roster spot on something they needed to kind of make a bigger impact. Okudah needed a fresh start, new uniform, new beginning for him. And I think there's still opportunity there. Don't write off Jeff Okudah yet. I think there's definitely some opportunity. I want to see what he does in the regular season first, but I don't know. That's just kind of all I have to say about that. Other than that, though, Bud Dupree, Richie Grant, Grady Jarrett, of course, there are some playmakers on this defense. I think by far the most exciting thing you did was sign Jesse Bates, but A.J. Terrell, again, amazing corner. So the Falcons' defense, they upgraded. I'm going to be honest, they upgraded. They're not going to be I guess they weren't. Honestly, I'm not really sure where they ranked last year as far as defense goes, but I feel like it wasn't the highest. But, I mean, now it's going to be higher than last year regardless of where they ranked last year. I'm not really sure if it was considered good or bad last year. Doesn't matter. It's going to be higher this year either way. I think they made a lot of nice upgrades, and they're going in the right direction, unfortunately. And yeah, so I want to move to the schedule portion of this video. We're going to come back and talk about a few things, maybe not in depth chart, but I do want to talk about a few more things. Let's talk about the schedule, though. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit there. They open against Carolina. They, have, I guess, some fairly tough games, but I'm going to be honest. I had the Falcons going 10-7 and winning the division, which I hate to say, but I have them win the division 10-7. Again, not by a lot. That's a 1-game difference in the Panthers and the Saints. I think it's going to be very close, but if I had to predict it, I would say the Falcons probably win it by a game. And let's talk through this schedule real quick. So, again, I'm just going to finish the video because I've said it so many times. But the divisional games, you got to win those. You guys get it. I've said it so many times. You got to win those divisional games because the teams are not the best. You have to make the most of that. Out of the division, though, they play the Lions. They play Jacksonville, Houston, Washington, Tennessee, Minnesota, Arizona, New York, Indianapolis, Chicago. Now, Chicago, Indianapolis, Arizona, Minnesota, probably Washington more so. 5-6 games out of the division you can win. That's probably more than the other teams in the NFC South. Like Cardinals, that's a must win. Kind of same with Green Bay. I think Green Bay is a step up from Arizona, but the Falcons, I think, are able to win that. I think realistically the Falcons probably start 2-1. They win their first two, then lose to Detroit, but maybe they beat Detroit and they start 3-0. I don't see a way where they beat Jacksonville. And the teams like that, like there's no chance they beat the Jets in my opinion. There's no chance they beat the Titans in my opinion, or the Jaguars. The reason I say Titans because that's a team that I've been pretty high on since landing DeAndre Hopkins and kind of bringing things together. And again, I'll talk more about that and elaborate more whenever that team prediction thing comes around. So if you're not going to watch that video, then just kind of take my word for it right now, then I'm pretty high on the Titans. But yeah, so again, I think the biggest game that's an absolute no chance is the Jets. But other than that, fairly open. Jets, Jaguars, other than that, you can beat pretty much the rest of these teams. It's going to be pretty close. So the Falcons, I think, are very capable. But I got to mention the big thing holding me back one more time, and that's Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder, I'm not saying is going to be a bad quarterback. That's not what I'm saying. It is the question or not of if he's going to be a good quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but the chance that he's not going to be good is what scares me. Because other than that, let's go back to this offense. Like, you got Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, who are two running backs who can very easily be on the field at the same time. You have Drake London and Kyle Pitts. If that is a really good quarterback, that is a deadly offense. If Desmond Ridder is a good quarterback, he's going to utilize this offense very, very well. If he's not a good quarterback, it's going to kind of look like the Jets with Zach Wilson, where you know it's all there. It just can't be used because the quarterback just it can't come together. So that's what scares me about the Falcons, and that's why for a time I was thinking Falcons even below the Panthers and Saints because of Ridder, but you can't rank them that low with all the because they made their defense. I can't see how they're going to be if they do finish worse than the Panthers and the Saints. It's going to be because they did that to themselves. It must have been they lost some kind of winnable game because this schedule, I would say, is probably the easiest out of the other teams in the NFC South. And maybe I'm wrong statistically, but just looking at it, like in my opinion, it's the easiest. Maybe, you know, the NFL's ranks are higher and it is statistically harder. But in my opinion, I think this is the most winnable schedule in the NFC South. And I think the Falcons are very capable of winning a whole lot of these games. I think the biggest ones are the divisional games, like I mentioned, for every team in this division. Like, if they happen to get swept by any team in the division, that's big. That's two big losses because those could have been two big wins for you. And as we know in football, every game matters. No, it's not competitive like the AFC, or not as competitive like the AFC is, but the NFC South is going to be very competitive because the teams are all on a pretty similar level. So you got to win those divisional games. But I think out of the division, the Falcons have some very winnable games as well, like Arizona, especially, and Houston. Those are two games where, like, you know, if everything else somehow turns against you, you know you'll win those two games. I don't see a reason why the Falcons could not beat the Cardinals and the Texans. But yeah, so I think there's a lot of winnable games in there. As much as it sucks to say it from a Panthers fan, but Falcons, I think you got the Panthers and Saints by one game. But again, predicting December 17th from whatever, I don't even know what the date is, honestly, today. Sometime in August, sometime in late August. Like, that doesn't really mean a whole lot because a lot can happen from now to then. So one game difference doesn't really mean anything. But in my opinion, yes, they would finish a game higher. But yeah, this division, totally open, totally up for grabs. But if I had to rank it, it would go Falcons, Panthers, Saints, tie for second or third, whatever. And then the Buccaneers, who would be fourth. And again, that can all shift. But as of right now, how I feel about these teams, that's the direction I would go. For my bold predictions here, we have to do all offense. I know I said the Falcons upgraded on defense. I gave them a lot of respect there. Hopefully I said that more now. Maybe if I didn't do a good job conveying that in my last video and people said that. I don't remember what video it was, to be honest, but I don't know. I got some comments like that from Falcons fans. So hopefully I did a better job of that if I did do a poor job the first time. But I do want to predict the offense because I think the offense is the big story of this team, honestly. I think the defense, you got like players where you know what you're going to get. You got solid guys. Offense where there's some question marks. So let's do Desmond Ridder. I want to say his like gambling line is like 2,500 yards or something. We'll say Ridder gets 3,000 yards. I don't honestly know if he's a good quarterback for them this year. I have no idea how he wouldn't get that because Mariota got 2,200 and didn't play every single game. This would be assuming Ridder is, for one, good, and then can also use Drake London, Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, and Kyle Pitts. I would really think he can get that 3,000-yard mark. Touchdowns, I don't really know because, again, you have Bijan Robinson. Maybe you run it more. I'm just kind of not really going to go with that. 3,000 yards, I think it's very, very doable for Desmond Ridder. Bijan Robinson, we're going to say 1,500 all-purpose yards, meaning rushing or receiving yards from the line of scrimmage, 1,500 total. So, he could get any combination between the two, rushing or receiving. And we're going to say Kyle Pitts, back over 1,000 yards. I don't know why he wouldn't. If you're using him correctly, he is a 1,000-yard tight end year after year. The dude is very, very good. So hopefully they incorporate him more this year because he's a fun player to watch. And he, deserves to have his career kind of elevated properly instead of not, utilizing him. Because if you piss him off, he's going to want out. So you got to use him correctly because you are wasting a very good career if you don't. That's really my three. You could say Drake London 1,000 too if you think 1,000 receivers with him and Kyle Pitts. Definitely very possible. But I'm going to stick with those three. But yeah, so that's really my thoughts on the Falcons. I think they, as of right now, win the division by a game. We'll see how the season shakes out. My favorite division so far, let's just kind of go off a little tangent here. My favorite divisions as far as competitiveness are probably like AFC North, AFC East, NFC South. NFC South is solely because I'm a fan, though. If I wasn't a fan of these teams, I could not care less what they do. As far as being competitive, though, and because I am a Panthers fan, I'm pretty excited for them, and I'm excited for the NFC East to see how that shakes out. Not to say the AFC West isn't competitive or anything like that, but those are like my top, I don't know if I said 3 or 4. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it all shakes out. This is, I think, we have, we're a week and 4 days away from the season from the time of recording this, I think. So it's coming quickly. I'll have the other divisions out probably every 2 or 3 days from the previous one until they're all done. But yeah, if you guys did enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more NFL content like this because I do a lot of it. I do a lot of these team prediction stuff. We did an entire player prediction series, 1 player for every single team. We do NFL tier list videos, NFL quiz videos, and just any kind of NFL news as the season goes on. So I also do Madden videos as well. No Money Spent series, pack openings, new permanent content news, and I cannot remember what I was going to say other than that. Gameplays, if I didn't say that, but yeah. So always football on the channel, one way or another, whether it's NFL or Madden. So if that sounds something you would like, then subscribe to my channel because we are, I think, 15 away from 500, which is so cool. So thank you guys for all that. I do really appreciate it. But yeah, that's going to do it for the video. Let me know down below anything I got right or wrong or your thoughts as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.